Hi, it's Piotrek Kaliński from FlexiProject, and today I would like to go over the changes introduced to our system with the 2025-06 update. The first of these changes is the introduction of the Programs tab in the project list. The Programs tab and the grouping of projects into programs allows us to view the schedule collectively for all those projects. To access this tab at all, as a user, I need a full license with management permission for the project tab. If I have such access, I can go to a sample project program. Here, I can add a program by entering its name and then, after selecting the name, define which projects belong to the given program. I will now enter one of the example programs. If I collapse this view, I can see which projects are included in the project program. To add or remove projects from this program, I can either use this option here to add projects or click the red cross to remove them, as well as rearrange the order in the tab. I can save these changes and, of course, freely expand or collapse individual elements of the entire program schedule in this view. As well as see the Gantt chart in a better view, like quarterly, to observe how specific projects and tasks follow one another. And also to see the dependencies between them. If I collapse this and go to that view, we can see clearly that all those dependencies appear in the schedule. One of the most important changes to the schedule view is the relationship between tasks from different projects. Because previously, if we had a task in one project and we created a dependency with a task in another project, that dependency was purely informational. So, you couldn't really see any impact on task had on another in the schedule if they were from different projects. In this system version, we have a new option, Recalculate Dependencies, which recalculates the entire schedule based on the dependencies that exist between tasks from different projects. If I click on Recalculate Dependencies, maybe I will go into the monthly view, then I can see the relationships updating. And also, if a task or a project is changed by this update, it gets visually highlighted. And this is visible both on the Gantt chart and in the task list, where we can see the original start date and how the inter-project dependency affects the new start date, and in this case also the duration. This applies now to the project implementation of e-learning platform and several tasks linked to other tasks in other projects. How the Gantt chart indicates the difference between the originally planned and recalculated dates is visible right here. The original dates are shown as empty rectangles with a black border, indicating the earlier planned date. In this case, for this task that should be August and September, and now it shifts. If we accept the changes, we click Save, and those inter-projects dependencies are saved as the current schedule. And if we save it, that means the changes are saved in the schedule of the specific projects affected by the dependencies. Including these dependencies has impact the schedule in the given individual project. So it is important to note that in the project history we can see these changes, though it's worth mentioning that this operation we performed is irreversible, which is why we have this preview window to make sure we want to make this change and perform recalculate dependencies in the project. And once we do this, the change cannot be undone. One more thing has changed regarding task dependency editing within a project. Previously, when choosing dependencies, we could add them either between tasks in the same project or between a task in one project and a task in another. The first option remains unchanged. The second, however, has some minor updates. As we can now choose the type of relationship, but also whether we want to set a fixed difference as a fixed lag between the tasks. If I select an element in the schedule, say implementation of customer service system, and choose an element and set a fixed lag of 5, it is important to remember that the relationship will be created, but until I click recalculate dependencies, the schedule won't be updated to include this dependency. Of course, it will be visible in the task details and serve an informational purpose, but only after clicking recalculate dependencies will it have an impact on other projects. It is also important to note that this impact will only concern projects that belong to the same project program. If a project is outside of that program, those dependencies will not be considered, as we are only working on the schedule of the entire program. What's more, another change introduced in the system with the update is the ability to assign owners to summary task. If I go into a sample task, we see a summary task and its subtasks. If I click here, I can now add an owner to the summary task. We can also notice a new icon in the system showing how many subtasks belong to a given summary. Clicking on this list displays the full list of tasks with owner icons. It's worth mentioning that assigning an owner to a summary task, in this case we can assign Daniel to project planning, gives that user access to all its subtasks. Because not every user, depending on permissions, has access to the entire schedule, sometimes only to specific elements they are assigned to. If Daniel is assigned to the summary task, he has also access to the 5 subtasks shown below. It's worth noting that with editing permissions on the schedule, we can now create subtasks directly from here. Previously, we created them via right-clicking and add subtask. Here we can add a subtask directly from the summary task view. If I type new task and hit enter, a new task appears at the bottom. Moreover, such a summary task previously wasn't visible on the task list at all. It's served mainly to organize subordinate elements in the schedule. Now, if we go to the task list, such a task appears. Here we can also see that the task has subtasks. Clicking here shows subtask details just like before. If this task is completed and closed, the summary task, project planning, will also be closed. If I try to close the summary task from this level, I will get a message that task completion is still in progress, asking whether I want to close a task that hasn't been finished, which would lead to closing the summary task. It's also worth mentioning that summary tasks will now appear in task reports. If I generate a task report and let's say I want to see all tasks in the system, having this report, when I scroll down, I can see which ones are summary tasks. And one more important point about summary tasks is that we can now enter allocation data for them, specifying the number of hours required to complete the task. This enables high-level effort planning because we may choose not to plan effort at the subtask level and instead plan it on the summary element. When a value is entered here, the system calculates the hour total, as if the task were to be executed. Another change introduced to the system is the ability to perform bulk actions on various schedule elements. We can now see checkboxes on the left-hand side, which we can mark. If I mark several such checkboxes, several options became available. We can change owner, dates, duration, urgency, task priority, department, or other schedule elements defined at the system settings level. And we also have the option to delete items. It is important to remember that any changes made here override the values instead of adding to them. For example, if I changed the department, all selected tasks will now belong to one specific department. If I click Save, we will see that the changes have been applied. Notably, we can also change task owners. Let me switch to another project and filter tasks by owner. For example, I search for all tasks assigned to Olivia Thompson. Select them all and reassign to Henry Wilson and Alex Johnson. If I click Save, the tasks disappear from this filter and are assigned to the new owners. When changing a date, dependent schedule elements are also updated accordingly. That means if I change a start or end date in the schedule, and if there are any dependencies, the schedule is recalculated for the project and for the program, provided the project in the project program. The next system change relates to task allocation tracking. If I go into resources list, I can see allocations for each project. And for employees in my organization. In this case, we can see that only some tasks in projects and some projects are being counted. This is because one project, implementation of customer service system, is not included in the workload. We can define at the system settings level by going to the resource tab, allocation counting, and select which project stages are counted towards allocation. If I open it, I see that projects that are pending, in progress, and completed are included in the allocation, while other projects are not. We can also decide whether data from example archival projects will be included in such allocation. It is also important to note that this information will not only appear here in the Resources tab, but also if we go to a given project and open the Gantt chart in case of any overloads. If a project, here we see one with an overload because we have 42 hours, if we have any projects that are not counted towards allocation, but including them would cause an overload, then they will be highlighted in yellow. Another change I want to mention is the ability to set notifications concerning tasks. When this notification is enabled, it will provide the user with information about any changes to their tasks. For example, if someone changes the task content, dates, attachments, such notification will be sent by email and will also appear here as an alert. It is worth noting that such notifications are sent once over 5 minutes, so if many changes happen to our tasks within 5 minutes, we will receive a consolidated notification about these changes. And another change introduced with this update concerns risks in project portfolios. Previously, we only had access to risk in summary reports, but now we can click on risks and see the full list of risks for the entire project portfolio. On the right, we can see the source project as well as other details. If I want, I can perform operations such as filtering, adjusting column information, and by clicking, go directly to a specific risk. But that's not the only change, because if we enter a specific project to the risk tab, previously we could not modify the columns displayed. They were fixed. Now, if I click on a column, I can disable information that doesn't interest me, enable those that do, and also reorder columns. This can be a helpful improvement for those who frequently work with the risk management module in FlexiProject. Another addition in this edition is the ability to provide aggregated total effort for projects and registered working time in projects. Previously, this option was not available. Now, if I create a report for projects, earlier this was the only possible for task. In this case, if I go to projects, when I click add, I see all projects that are in progress, and in the columns I can add, for example, information about allocation and work time. I add these values, maybe remove others, and here we have work time and allocation. Also, when I click Add, I see that registered working time and project allocations are indicated. One of the changes you might have already noticed, as it's visible on the screen, is the sum field that totals numeric values in reports, but also in other places in the system. And this applies to fields such as work time, budget, but also any custom fields that we can create ourselves. Moreover, these sums appear not only in the projects tab, but also in other, for example, in budget. Another change in the system is the possibility to use a model when adding projects, for example, to portfolios or to project reviews. When I click Add here, I have the option to add a project. When I click Add Project, it not only see the full list of projects, but also have the option to filter them by attribute, such as project stage, condition, project manager, or others I define, for example, project category or subcontractors. Suppose I want to find projects with medium and high priority, where I only have priority medium. I select all and I can add all 3 projects at once. In this window, there is another change we made in the system, a more visual one. In the case of project charters that are approved and archived, previously fields that could not be changed manually and were loaded automatically were grayed out, which caused a somewhat unaesthetic visual impression. So now the view is unfilled. Only places that cannot be fully edited are marked with an icon, a crossed circle. So as you can see, this gives a very clean and aesthetic appearance. Another update after the application concerns the project portfolio view. Here we see the view that previously could be customized by each user, meaning each user could set the portfolio visibility differently for the whole portfolio. In New System Edition, this view is fixed for all users. This is because often people working with project portfolios, coordinators showing the portfolios to other users noticed that their portfolio view differed from others. So, by unifying the portfolio view, the system becomes simply easier. Next, and I think much awaited change in the system concerns working with colors, because previously when choosing colors we only had the option to manually select using a slider. So we change it, and in this edition there is an option to choose default colors from a palette prepared by us, as well as the option to use a specific color code that can be copied and pasted. This significantly facilitates creating, for example, project documents, where in project cards, project charters, we could also define colors that separate different sections. So, thanks to this, working in the system becomes easier, and we also have a simpler way to pick colors. The last useful feature added to our system is information in the user settings about the license assigned to a given user. Because previously, when a user entered here, they could not see the type of the license. And unless they had access to Administration tab and to the list of all users and licenses, they couldn't check which license they personally had. Now it is much easier to verify because we have changed it in this new release. I definitely encourage you to like this video if you appreciate these changes, and also to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any news related to system releases or guides that we regularly publish for you. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a successful use of FlexiProject system.